Indiana, we are simply passing through history. This is history.
Welcome to the Young Indy Chroniclers, a podcast about the making of the show The Young Indiana Jones Chronicles, which first aired on ABC in 1992.
Kept thinking about what was Indiana Jones like as a young man. I came up with this idea of him seeing the world through the eyes of a soldier and a secret agent.
Over the course of our podcast, we're going to talk to a whole host of very talented people who either worked on this show or were there from the beginning.
We were able to shoot it on location in the real places where these events took place.
Oh, make it up as you go. Oh boy, that's great advice.
We hired some of the best European directors, a whole host of very, very talented people.
I'm your host, Peter Holmstrom.
And I'm Daniel Noah, and this is the Young Indy Chroniclers.
There's only one rule, Indiana. Stay alive.
Welcome back to the Young Indy Chroniclers, the one and only podcast focused specifically on the Young Indiana Jones television series and franchise. I'm your host, Peter Holmstrom. Joining me on this adventure of a lifetime is Mr. Daniel Noah.
Saddling up, Peter. We're so excited today to be bringing to you an interview with a very important guest who will be in George Lucas' The Lost Golden Age in person. This is a teaser for you, a great taste of the things you can expect in the documentary, which, by the way, we still have a few days left on the Kickstarter, and you can still pre-order your Blu-ray, your DVD, or any of the great little merch add-ons that we've put together, signed vinyl albums from Joel McNeely, some great stuff. So you have a few days left. Please check it out, Kickstarter.com. Just search George. I find that if you search George on Kickstarter.com, we're the first thing that comes up. So Kickstarter.com, search George.
Yeah, as we get down to it, we like to remind people out there that this documentary is not just about young Indiana Jones. It is about this larger period in George Lucas's life and career, and really the most important period of his career, and where he's building out this technology, he's building out his crew, he's building out his team, the Avengers, you might say, I don't know, style of team up for people that will then carry with him into the prequel trilogy. On today's show, we're very thrilled to have a returning guest, one of our favorites. He was a production designer on Young Indiana Jones, also worked on Radioland Murders, and went on to work on the Star Wars Special Editions. Most recently, he's worked on such shows as Silo, Citadel, and is working as production designer on the upcoming Avengers Doomsday. Gavin Bocquet, thanks very much for being here.
My pleasure. Always enjoyable talking about things we've enjoyed working on in the past.
Gavin, I was listening to our first episode we did with you the other day, and it occurred to me, we asked you about the interview process for Young Indiana Jones, and then we kind of jumped from there right into your work and your exciting times on the show and everything. I wondered if maybe I'd start us off by asking, do you recall what your very first day was like on the show?
You have to remember, it wasn't quite my first job as a production designer, but it was pretty close. And although I'd done a lot of feature work previously in the art department, my first production design job was a sort of TV series in the UK with a UK company, sort of a bit like Miami Vice, but set in Hong Kong.
That's far enough.
What?
How do I know you're not setting me up?
Sorry, Mr. Hicks, I haven't the time.
Don't answer it.
It could be important.
I'm important. That's all you got to worry about.
So I'd had that experience. And that's why when I heard about the Young Indy show and trying to find out who was going to be involved in it, was it Robert Watts and it wasn't, and he put me in touch with Rick McCallum, obviously. But for production designer, the first day with a blank piece of paper on any show you're on is, wow, that's okay. That's an interesting thing. And very sadly, about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I went to the funeral of Stuart Craig, who was one of my sort of big mentors and got me into the business, actually, who went on and do Harry Potter and whatever, sort of multi-Oscar winner.
In every one of these, there's a big challenge. In this case, I think it's that underground cave where they find the Horcrux. So we explored the Crystal Cave idea, and it is absolutely enormous, some 2,000 feet long. And so absolutely no possibility of building that physically. So it's a CG set, therefore, virtual set, designed in the computer. On Harry Potter 5, we had our first totally virtual set. So, this was... with more confidence we approached this one.
So he was a huge influence on my career, got me into the film business. I worked up with him through the art department. And I do remember that he was always very helpful when I got my first job. It's like, what do you do with that blank piece of paper? And his sort of one bit of advice was, you're not going to solve all the problems in that first day. You just have to take a deep breath and do one thing at a time, have a schedule for doing that. And one general thing he said, and just be always honest with what you're trying to do. And it's funny, when you look back at some of those things, they sort of stay with you. And because he gave me a chance in the film business when I came out of college, when it was quite unusual in the UK in the sort of late 70s, early 80s, for you to come from further education into films. If normally you become a print boy at Pinewood at 16, and that was sort of the earlier view. So coming from a postgraduate design course was quite unusual. And I know Stuart had to sort of, in a sense, persuade the production, why are they getting this scrawny, punky kid from the Royal College of Art when we can get a nice print boy to come in at 16 from school.
You ever worked in the theater before?
Yeah, once in Barcelona.
Barcelona?
Spain, with Diaghilev's Russian ballet?
Diaghilev, you putting me on?
No, I was a eunuch.
Get that thing out of here!
So I always felt right throughout my career, right through Young Indy Star Wars, that I was almost proving Stuart's trust in me.
I will train him then. I take Anakin as my Padawan learner.
All the time. I'm just going a bit offline here, but that's sort of, it's all part of when you start a show. So you always look back to those people that really helped you along the way. And Norman Reynolds was the other one who obviously designed, Jedi and Empire. And so those are my two mentors.
I told George when I first accepted the project, I said, I'll do the movie, but I'm going to shoot it real fast.
Right.
This isn't, we're not going to do 20 takes on a 14-inch dolly shot.
Hey, what's the roof right there? I mean, it is a flat roof.
Yeah.
Can I get up there with the camera?
Yeah.
You built that, didn't you?
Yes, we added that piece.
Well, good.
Right.
So I can't remember the first day we were in the office, but the first we were at the Jam Factory in London, just by Tower Bridge, an old jam factory as it was, a Jello factory for you. And you're sitting in there. I think I'd probably already chosen the supervising art director and maybe hadn't got the set decorator. So you end up being in an office with one person and a runner or a coordinator, just wondering how you're going to do this. And obviously Young Indy was quite an ambitious show in terms of how Rick and George were trying to set it up. And I think I may have said this in my first interview or meeting with you, that I think the idea was that they wanted every episode to be the same cost as MacGyver.
Do you recall your Greek, MacGyver? Sigma is the letter S. Yes, as in Solon.
So, Atticus is still hunting for the mythical Atlantis, is he? A man will never learn.
The international trade in stolen antiquities and fine art is very big business, second only to narcotics.
The Royal Academy, sir.
Which was the sort of the TV series, contemporary, and yet we were traveling around the world. And I think it was $500,000 an episode, I think. So that was initially a challenge. But what you do in your job, you surround yourself with a lot of good people. I try not to, you don't want to get. I think some people are nervous about employing people who sort of maybe more skillful in certain areas than they are themselves. But to me, that's the opposite. It's like, let's just surround yourself with people who do those jobs as best as they can. And individually, they probably do their individual jobs better than you do. But as a production designer, you have a sort of orchestra conducting role where you're sort of just trying to control and keep everybody on track. But I think that the main thing you start, and it's not specifically about Young Indy. We knew it was very much a location show. The good thing was, I think we had most of the scripts when we started. I mean, that's what George wanted to do. So you could really plan well, like, where can we go? Where can we find these locations? So I think I can't tell you what the actual day was like, but it was probably a mix of panic, excitement, and nervousness.
Who were your kind of close collaborators on the show? You mentioned the art directors. Who do you remember working with closely?
Oh, we had sort of Phil Harvey, who's actually coming on to Doomsday with me. Ricky Ayres, who went on after the 2 seasons to do the 3rd season when we were doing Radioland Murders. We had Ian Gill as the buyer. We had Peter Walpole as the set decorator. We had 2 or 3 set decorators. As we were crossing countries, they were leapfrogging to different countries. I'm often bumping into people that I work with who I seem to give their first job to, which is quite interesting. When I joined Doomsday halfway through their prep last year, the supervising art director was Ben Collins, and is still Ben Collins, and we gave him his first job on Attack of the Clones.
I've been tracking a bounty hunter named Jango Fett. Do you know him?
There are no bounty hunters here that I am aware of. The Geonosians don't trust them.
Well, who can blame them? But he is here, I can assure you.
Wow.
And in that time, he'd sort of risen to supervising art director.
As you see, my Jedi powers are far beyond yours. Now, back down.
I don't think so.
I also went to meet an American art director who's working over here, Luke Freeborn, who's doing the new Sonic movie, did 2 Sonic movies, did a lot of supervising on Avatar. And so I had a nice chat. We hadn't seen him for a while, but he's been over. But I gave him his first job years ago on Triple X, isn't it, I think?
I noticed you got 3 X's on your neck. That's appropriate since you're looking at 3 strikes.
I've seen the girls, the parties, the clubs. But what you don't see is what goes on during the day.
Not bad. Not bad at all.
The things I'm gonna do for my country.
Or was it Rocky and Bullwinkle?
This summer, evil meets its moose. Good evening, America. Bullwinkle Moose here saying, forgot my line. A criminal mastermind threatens to take over the world.
Are you talking to me?
What?
Are you talking to me?
No, I'm talking about you.
Well, I'm the only one here, so you must be talking to me.
It's a nice feeling because you felt you made good choices because they've gone on to do quite well.
Remember, kid, a Marine can't be defeated. Oh, you can kill us, but we'll just regroup in hell.
Absolutely.
If I looked at the crew list, there would probably be quite a few people like that just by nature, they've just gone on and done good things, and a long time ago now, if they're still alive, they're probably still working.
Let's hope.
Yes. So, I'm still here, so hopefully some of those are still here.
It occurred to me looking at your resume, not only from Young Indy and Radioland Murders, but even things like Young Sherlock Holmes, other projects like that. You were kind of involved with a lot of these projects that were integrating computer-generated imagery or effects, digital sets, digital matte paintings, things like that.
Yeah.
Very much for kind of the first time. I wonder if you had any thoughts about that in terms of like how your job changed, knowing that maybe a certain element would be augmented with CGI, or was it very much just like moving along and we're...
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the times, for me particular, you're not planning a career of huge ambition. I want to go that way or that way. There's a lot of sliding doors moments and opportunities come along and you grab them. And by default or some chance way, I have ended up obviously doing quite a lot of what you might call visual effects heavy shows.
Anyone who makes films hopes at one point to get the chance to create a world.
Even though we're doing fantastical environments, it still had to feel real. It's hard to think of another project like this in terms of the scale of imagery that we've had to produce. You feel as though you're at the vanguard of something that hasn't been done before. Obviously, I do have an experience of doing that.
Padme's veranda, with which is sort of outside inside. We were just wondering
how exposed that is
in terms of any aging or weathering or anything.
The further you go back into it, the less distressed it is.
Okay, fine.
Sometimes I feel people's admiration or thoughts about me being able to work on those films is a bit sort of, well, it's not really rocket science. But I'm happy to live on that notoriety for a sec. But obviously, technology-wise, I don't know how the visual effects side works. But in terms of knowing what you can achieve with it is the key thing. And I think whether you're going back to Gone with the Wind when it was foreground miniature ceilings or glass paintings, it's the same process of just understanding how you can extend what you can physically build to give the audience what they want to look for, well, obviously, and the director as well. But I think, as you probably know from young Sherlock Holmes, that was the stained glass window character jumping out of the stained glass with Dennis Muren was the first sort of 3D element that I think was seen in a feature film on that basis. So, and then I also worked on the second season of Greek Myths, which was Jim Henson's sort of TV series, which also relied on a lot of old techniques and new techniques. I suppose by default, once if you end up working on shows that have that sort of input, as you move along, people will look at you and say, well, you've done that. So when another film comes up or show comes up that needs some of that experience, you're going into that list. And obviously, once it goes up to, production designer, right at the top end of that, people are always looking for, well, like I did, I'm looking for people who are good at their job, and people will look at me and think, he seems to be okay in that world. But I think sometimes it's a bit smoke and mirrors, that I'm happy to live on the notoriety, but I don't think it's quite rocket science. But your experience is always something that is hard for yourself to justify. You know what I mean? It's sort of trying to analyze what you think you know. It's only when I sometimes lecture at colleges and things, and the students very earnestly ask you questions about how and why you did things and what was it like. And they always expect you to be able to theorize all your reasonings down to the nth degree. And a lot of the times you're just saying back to them, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time in terms of what you do, because a lot of what we do, as you can imagine, it's on instinct. It's people want something tomorrow. You get a lot of prep, but sometimes the decision is something you need to make instantly, and all your judgments, I suppose, come together. But I mean, you're right. When you look through my sort of roster of work, it does seem to involve a lot of visual effects. I don't think it really affects how I do. I mean, as a production designer, sadly, you can't see the work that's the other side of me here.
Sure.
but you're designing with the concept artist, you're designing whole environments. You're not at that stage. We're not at that stage where we're wondering, how do we achieve it? Whether it's built sets, location, build on location, visual effects enhancement. It's that you create the whole world before you start breaking it down. And then these days, on a show like this, the visual effects supervisor, like Chris Townsend on this show, who's done quite a few Marvel movies, they're almost on with you right from the beginning. And it's a sort of very sort of connected relationship we have. We all know the ideas of where it's best. You always get asked the question, where do we stop building and where do they start? And it's just your vast experience tends to sort of just make you understand that reasoning. And there's always a natural line. Every scene, every length of scene, every bit of action is always really different. So there's never one rule. We only go to 12 feet high. And I think I may have said this last time. So I think when Phantom Menace was being publicized, that Rick McCallum was saying that all the sets were only 6 feet high. And when Liam Neeson joined, they had to make them 12 feet high, and which was a complete lie. I mean, it's a publicity thing, because I think they were keen that this was a digital world we were producing, but
Sure.
Where it's necessary, we were building 30 feet high. If it's cheaper, I mean, digital work even today, it's a brilliant tool, but it's not the cheapest tool in the world. And visual effects houses will still tell you today, build as much as you can, just because they know what they have to do. But if you've got a simple fact is, if you've got a very small, short scene in a very big environment, the chances are you're going to sort of head towards the visual effects world. But if you've got a long scene in a relatively small environment, or areas that you can keep within camera, you're going to build what you can and stop every shot being a comp of some sort. But I think, from your question, I don't think it really affected what I was doing. It just became part of your natural knowledge that, okay, we have to do something here, that we can't build the whole thing. And your knowledge just started to say that, don't worry, with the budget and with what visual effects can do. Young Indy was, I'm sure I mentioned this before, that was George wanted about 3 or 4 shots in each episode, which were a film quality of scale. And it was the first TV series that I think that had gone into that sort of direction, and most of that sort of replication work and digital visual effects work was being done in commercials at the time on the old Harry machines. So we did employ, not ILM, we employed a production company, commercial production company in San Francisco who used those machines, and that's where most of that work came from.
It's getting to a point with technology that if you can imagine it, there's machines out there that can do it. Harry's one of those machines. It can allow me to take different images and composite them together into one, like an artist would do with cut and paste, with a single image for a still ad maybe.
I think one of the most successful examples of manipulating some of the images that we got was a ring of horses that we created based on 10 horses that were shot in different setups, so that it was 10 horses here, rotate them 30 degrees, and there's 10 more horses, 10 more horses, and 10 more horses. We had some fun with that.
And I think we did manage to keep up to about 3 or 4 pretty dramatic environments in that world of Young Indy, to give it a filmic quality. I think, as we've probably said before, you look at all the TV shows, the streaming shows now, and it's hard to deny the fact that George and Young Indy was one of the first drama series to really push into that world, and was almost probably ahead of its time, because the whole streaming world is doing what they did in 92, 93, whatever the dates were back then.
A question for you, as we're working on this documentary, including Radioland murders into sort of our research, I've been doing a lot of reading on some things. When we interviewed Yusei Sugi as well from ILM, and he talked about sort of filling out the image of the auditorium, the theater, the main theater in Radioland Murders. And I've looked at the shots many times, and I can't find the matte lines. I don't honestly know where the set ends and the painting begins. So I was wondering, how much building did you do there? What was your thought process about constructing that space? Wonder if you could speak to that.
Yeah, we couldn't rely on a film with a relatively smaller budget on that to do enhancements, so we built as high as we could. But actually, the main ceiling shots in that show were a foreground miniature. We had a foreground miniature ceiling that we hung in place, and like the old days, you put a cross on the floor, and David Tattersall, the DP, and obviously Mel Smith, the director. That's where the camera was. So I think any time you see the ceiling, I can't say every shot, every time you see the ceiling in that show, it's a foreground miniature. So you're really looking back at the old techniques. So I'd have to sort of relook at it to check, but there were 2 main positions. One was from the stage, when you're on the stage looking out, and then one when you're looking back from the auditorium down to the stage area, the proscenium, that I think that's when we just used, it was about 18 feet square, I think, the whole thing. There may well have been shots that they suddenly did have to add to later on, but no, I think that was, we actually did other shots, like other foreground miniatures, like there's a shot outside the tower, when you start up on the top of the tower and you come down, which that's the digital, the top bit, but then you come down past the main canopy outside with the sign on it, WBN. Well, that was a foreground miniature also close to camera. So it went from the digital through this foreground miniature piece down to the floor. In those situations, like with any of that process, the director needs to understand that you can't really move the camera. It's like it only works here. So these days, directors are probably don't want to be sort of right across the board, but generally directors aren't so keen to make those decisions these days. They want to have a bit more flexibility in where they can go. I mean, interestingly, my first, going back to Stuart Craig, sadly passed away, the second film I worked with him on, or third film, was Mel Brooks' History of the World, Part 1.
Oh, competence, tell me. What will happen to those two rogues when they are caught?
If they're captured, they're hung.
Not necessarily.
And they were in America, also back here, and we had to build part of Versailles Palace for Louis XV or 16th, whoever Mel Brooks was. And we had to build his bedroom matching to Versailles and the long corridor. And Stuart Craig was always very keen, even Harry Potter's, of getting any sort of false perspective pieces in anywhere. So he gave me the job, my first job, of drawing a door leading off of the bedroom went into a perspective corridor, like the length of Versailles. So it was a reduced, perspective piece. And there's a scene where Mel Brooks is being chased by the peasants. I think the line is, the peasants are revolting.
It is said that the people are revolting.
You said it. They stink on ice.
No, Your Majesty, this is a very serious problem. The peasants feel you have no regard for them.
What? I have no regard for the peasants. They are my people. I am their sovereign. I love them. Pull!
Is the line. and he runs into the bedroom, and he runs into the perspective. He runs into the foreground perspective, and goes, "Who designed this?" And you think, "Oh, that's just on the day." But if you watch the film, it's in the film.
Who designed this place?
It's in. He runs into this forced perspective piece, gets smaller and smaller, and just said, "Who designed this palace?" And then left.
It's good to be the king.
So my first experience of drawing a perspective set was something ending up on camera like that with the humour. So you can tell, and a slightly broader there, when people like Stuart are your mentors and they give you these things to do, that sort of stays with you. And Joe Russo, I have to say, and Anthony are very keen on that side of things, that experience of doing work that way. Of course, it's restricted because we're in a very different world here, in the world of visual effects. But wherever we can do anything or suggest something to Joe that is using some of that world, it was quite interesting on the tag of Doomsday, which you saw at the end of what's the new Avengers? What's it called? Oh, Thunderbolts. The end of Thunderbolts. Yeah. At the end of Thunderbolts, you're just in the Avengers Tower, and all the characters are in there of Thunderbolts, and then the other characters they come in. And that was a set that was built for us on the film, but they needed to shoot that tag section way ahead of the main shoot because the film was coming out, so they needed a tag. So Chris Townsend, they only had 3 days to do any post on that shot in there, which is not long, obviously, and it's a huge picture window on one side. So for the tag, we used a physical backing, a sky backing of New York outside the window. There's a monitor on the screen which shows the F4 ship coming in. And because there was no time for post, everything on that set was virtually in camera, which is not unusual for me. That's what it was. You could go anywhere, and even the screen they had to shoot. And everybody was coming on. The Marvel guys were coming on. The actors were coming on. And they were almost saying, well, this is the first time we've been on a Marvel set where everything is in camera. They were so used to it having oh, we'll put the blue on the screen, we can put the ship in later. So wherever you look 360, it was like, oh, that's interesting. So we were very keen later on. We had a lot of sets with backings outside them, physical backings. And generally, the default situation previous to us was probably, let's put blue screen out there and do that. But wherever possible, we either had a Roscoe backing that we created ourselves or a painted backing. On, I think, 80% of interior sets with backings. And then it was all in camera, and in the end, that's as much a visual thing as a money thing, if they don't have to change the exterior. So wherever we could, we're bringing that bit of experience in just to adjust those things and not just presume you can always put it in visual effects. Filmmaking is an art of illusion, and if we can do it physically, I think, and Joe and Anthony really liked that. We can only do it certain instances, by nature of these films and the characters in them and the environments you're doing. But wherever possible, why not try those things? And that all comes, we had to do a lot of that in a simplistic way on Young Indy because we didn't have much money. So you couldn't, say the 3 or 4 shots that we could do, which were definitely a visual effects shot, they had to be really effective, and we had to do the rest of the show very cheaply, relatively, because any money that was spent on those shots, I think I probably told you last time, I think the shots were coming out, the average shot on a film was going to be at $25,000, and I think Joe and George were trying to get them down to $3,000 or $4,000 a shot by using and I think they worked, whether matte paintings or I think mostly matte paintings and glass paintings, I think.
You mentioned before we hopped on the recording, you rewatched recently the China episode of Young Indy, I just wonder, what do you think of it now? Are you critical of your work, or do you look back on this and say oh wow, this is such a great time?
No, not critical. I think when you see anything you do, you always think, oh, maybe we could have done that week. But no, it's a collaboration. The whole process is, and nothing's perfect. The odd thing is the format. It's like you're looking at it and it's like, it's not like, you forget, even those years ago, it's basically square. I mean, it's not square, but it sort of feels like that. So, but you still get the expanse. And I think we built quite a lot for the Egypt episode, like the tombs and everything. And that's always expensive. But no, I think I don't think Barry and I looked at it, oh dear, can't look at this. It was like, you're proud because you sort of knew it was a new thing. It was quite a challenge to do what we had to do to do China and Egypt within 10 miles of Tower Bridge in London was quite tricky. And although, funnily enough, the show I did before this with Joe was the Citadel series for Amazon, and we managed to shoot six countries within the M25, the orbital road around London. So you sort of, but although you build a rod for your own back by doing that, because people start to think, well, we don't need to go anywhere. We can find it all within there. So, I mean, I haven't seen the show yet, but hopefully it'll stand up.
It's funny, it's that old way of doing television that kind of was supplanted by the prestige, budget ones where it's like, oh, we have to go everywhere all around the world.
I mean, I think you'll probably know better. I think Hallmark they were the other company that were really doing sort of TV drama of that level. They were sort of producing shows on their own, which were sort of being shown in some other way. But it was an interesting. I mean, I can't even remember in the UK what channel showed it. Do you know what channel showed it in the UK? Was it BBC?
Daniel? There's a web. We found a website that does track all this stuff. Like I went down a rabbit hole one time of trying to determine if the Palestine episode had ever aired in its original 1 hour format, and there is some really wonderful fans out there that have track down all the various airings in every country and what time slot and what channel.
Well, of course, the box set I've got here is only the double episodes.
Right.
Which is a pity because you remember them as individual with the bookends, the chat either end of it.
Hi!
Grandpa, I'm practicing. Let's talk later. You've been practicing for 2 years. Do you feel that there's been any progress? Yeah, 2 years ago I knew 3 songs. Now I know 30. Quantity is not what I'm talking about. You may know 30 songs, but you play them all equally badly.
But, they have reasons for doing that and putting it out in a sort of marketing way.
Sure.
But I think technically, it's hard. They were hard to. We actually looked 2 or 3 of them. They're hard to sort of criticize. You stay within your limits of what you thought you could do, and generally in any creative world, the last thing we want to do with any set we build is. It's all about the finishes. It's all about the quality that you show. So if you can't afford to build quite so much, you want to make sure the bit you do build and the bit you see is a good finish. You don't want to spread yourself too thin. And I think probably the ambition was good on Young Indy, but it was sensible in the fact that we didn't want to do something that just didn't look like we had the money to do it.
The telephone line to the trenches is down. Are you a fast runner, Corporal? Yes, sir. What's happening, sir? The guns you hear are ours. The attack must begin when those guns stop firing. The enemy will have time to recover. If the enemy has time to recover, they will slaughter my men.
Sort of a subliminal thought, but if we couldn't achieve something one way and keep up the quality, we had to find another way of doing it.
This is Igor Vasily. He works with me at the Bureau.
Charmed, I'm sure. Niels has told me so much about you.
I'm sorry, but I'll be late for the ferry. Nils, I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay. Goodbye.
Thanks.
She's quite attractive.
What's happening at the office?
Everything is dead quiet. It seems almost eerie.
Well, to your point, there was, as much as there were effect shots, there are a lot of locations that are clearly used multiple times, right? Like it's clearly the same castle in every episode that there's a castle. Yeah. It's, and that's, as you mentioned, economic, and just, you light it different, you shoot a different way, you maybe dress it a little differently.
Yeah, and we were in Prague. We were in Prague probably for 4 episodes, I think, and you're trying to do Russia, you're doing France, you're doing Budapest. So you're obviously, but I always think, those things really only notice if the audience isn't engaged in the storytelling and has empathy with the characters. I think on that basis, you're always going to be okay. If that part isn't working, then the audience is going to start looking around, go, oh, I saw that in another episode. In one way, but it's. But I think I said to you last time with George when we used to even Phantom Menace when we used to look at quickly look at footage of inserts that John Knoll and the guys were doing, that George would only ever look at those sequences sort of 3 times, and he would always look at it with the bit before and the bit after because that's what the audience would see, and if all the general public want to go and analyze every pixel of every frame. George didn't mind, but that's not what he was making the film for.
It looks like Skywalker's moving up the field.
It just had to work as a piece of art for the hour and a half or the 2 hours or the 40 minutes. I mean, what were Young Indies? What were they coming out at? 45 minutes? Is that sort of...
Original airing would have been about that, yeah.
Because it's interesting, and these days, doing Citadel and Silo, obviously in the streaming world, it doesn't really matter so much. They're not tied to commercial breaks or anything. They just sort of, if the episode needed a 50-minute as opposed to a 70-minute, that's what they would do. But I presume Young Indy was still working with TV time slots, especially on your side, I would imagine.
Absolutely, and that I think was a big motivation for doing the re-edits as they are. It's not just a matter of smashing 2 episodes together. They're actually like physical re-edits of the episodes.
Definitely gonna miss high school. Definitely gonna miss high school.
Yeah, so I don't know. I mean, Martin Smith, a good friend of mine, was with the editor and on some of those. So when they were shown on the US TV, I wondered, did they have to edit to the breaks where how many breaks there were and get little crescendos at the
They
moment?
did, yeah. So that's another thing that's missing from the current DVD version is you don't really have that like the music swell and the tension building that leads to a commercial break. Instead,
Well,
it's
also,
just
presumably in different countries like the UK, they all have slightly different timings for commercials.
Sure, yeah.
So it almost feels like they would have had to do that for each country. Wow. That's the good thing now is most of the things we record or stream, we can whiz through the commercials.
Yeah, right.
Well, but the art of the build up to the commercial break is a bit lost. Like a lot of streaming services have commercial breaks, but there's no build up in the narrative to match like it used to be. So you have to sit there and endure the commercial and hope it doesn't bore you out of watching the rest of the show.
Yeah, I think I know. I have this thing where when I watch a lot of streaming shows that keep getting you hooked. Again, I may have told you before, but I try to watch them from the middle to the middle, not to the end. So I'll stop in the middle of an episode and then come back to, because they're always trying to they just want you to start again at the end of the episode. And usually in the middle of the episode, there's not so much happening. So you feel more comfortable to turn off, on that basis. And, if I could copyright that idea, that would be quite good, but I'm not quite sure how I'd do that. Because I know we've all sat and suddenly you're 4 episodes into a show because every end keeps dragging you into the next one.
Sure.
Doesn't it? On that basis, it was quite interesting watching. They were talking about Avatar and how long it was, and the question was, well, these days people sit and watch 7 hours of streaming one after the other. So what problem do they have in sitting in the cinema for 3.5 hours? Well, it's true, isn't it? But I suppose in the cinema you are fixed in your seat.
Fire is the only pure thing in this world.
It's a culmination, in a way, of the whole adventure across the previous 2 films.
Fire and Ash is almost a direct step from the end of the second movie. It's literally where we see them starting to tear.
You said you could protect this family.
I was wrong!
Whereas if you're at home streaming, you're a little bit more flexible, aren't you? You might watch sort of 5 hours continually, but you're up. But I remember, I don't know whether I think the Brutalist had an interval. I think the Brutalist had a set interval. Yeah. And I remember going to see things like Lawrence of Arabia all those years, and they definitely had an interval.
Yeah.
And I do remember, even on 2001: A Space Odyssey, I even remember the interval, because if you know the film, the 2 characters at one point are in the pod and they're chatting, so Hal can't hear them, and you have this shot of just they're just talking, and you can see it, and you can see that Hal can see them talking, and he's lip reading.
Yeah.
And that was the interval. It's just funny how you can, looking back to all those years when I saw that, you can remember. So they obviously, like the commercial on TV, they obviously planned very much where that interval would come.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But I suppose cinemas these days, they want to get the films in and out as quickly as possible, don't they, to get another sitting in.
Right.
So it's like, although the other side of that, people seem to go to the cinemas at 10 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock at nights now, which didn't used to happen 20, 30 years ago. It was like 2 o'clock, isn't it, on that way?
Although now in America, the big topic of conversation is that nobody's going to the cinema. And it's
we
had a rough fall.
And
I suppose like a lot of things, it's like you're sort of rolling with the ideas of how it's going. I was listening to a documentary by I think it's at Google, the head of the guy at Google developing AI and stuff, and he was just talking about the general things without going off sideways here about what's it replacing, what's it changing, and he was saying things like, well, look, it's giving people more time. It's like the days before dishwashers, when you got a dishwasher in your house for the first time. It suddenly allowed people to do other things rather than the dishwashing. Or when you got a microwave, it suddenly, whether that's true or not, I don't quite know. But it's like in this show, it's like digital, whatever. In my position, I have to encompass what those new ideas are, because it's a continually moving process, a continually moving beast. And you don't want to get just sort of stuck saying, well, it's not like it was in my day. It's like you don't want to become the grumpy old technician.
Sure.
You just got to roll with it. But and there'll be room for AI films. There'll be room for AI this and that. But I don't think it'll I think everybody agreed, didn't they, when television came in? They said it'd be the end of theatre, but it wasn't.
No, here we are.
Theatre is still going, or the end of film. Even TV was the end of film. But now you're saying that nobody's going to cinemas.
You give yourself not enough credit. I mean, I think, you have done that in your career. I mean, you think about what filmmaking was like in 1983 when you worked on Return of the Jedi, and then look at that set you built for Revenge of the Sith, the big, throne room set. And it's massive, but it's also going to be all virtual, and the horizon's going to be out to infinity. Yeah. And you had no way of knowing what that's going to look like, but it's seamless. I mean, that's a huge change. And you rode that out.
Yeah, no, but I think what it is, it sounds quite fast, or it feels fast, but it's actually slow. We had the same thing on Phantom Menace, and Luke Freeborn, who's doing this Sonic and worked on Avatar, he was saying how they would always be pushing to do certain things before the technology actually existed to do it. And I do remember, in the early storyboard meetings at Phantom Menace at the ranch, and there's some little YouTube clips of that, and we're all looking at storyboards that we'd coloured in fluorescent, what would be visual effect, what wouldn't be visual effect. And George was running through it, John Knoll was there, and they were talking to John and saying, "Oh, is this all possible?" They say,
"We don't have a real good way of doing that right now." So that's where some real innovation.
Yeah, I know that is the challenge.
Exactly. No, we have no idea how to do this, but by the time we get to do it, we will have learned. And I even little things like when I was on the Warcraft show in Vancouver, the motion capture with the orcs was basically motion capture in the sets. So it wasn't just going to a grey room or a blue screen room. And that was the first time, even after Planet of the Apes, that was the first time, I think, where the scenes were shot as they would be with the orcs in their motion capture, but actually in the sets as well. But even when we started that process, it's obviously not my area, the mocap, but they didn't know, they weren't sure they could do that. It was almost too complicated. So again, it's always a gradual process and moving. But the baseline of it is you're still trying to tell the story that's written down on a piece of paper.
Sure.
And designing sets and environments for it.
I'm all set. All I need is an idea.
On a piece of paper or on a screen, perhaps. But there you go.
Yeah. Yes, it's like although there seems to be more. I don't know. You'd think the digital world would have negated paper.
I'm buried in it. I'm buried in paper.
I don't know what it's like with you, but that doesn't seem to have sort of affected. I mean, it's funny. We present a lot of our work on this and other shows on big 8x4 black boards that we move around, and sometimes we have show and tells with the guys which are just online like this, flicking through things. And you almost can't beat just having a lot of work on the walls, because you can have 10 people looking at it, they can all pan and scan, they can see things, whereas if you're looking at one image at a time, if we were looking at it now, you'd just be going through one image at a time, and you couldn't quickly flip, let's have a look at 20, let's go back. So we still show most stuff. I think most work, I'm looking around now at it, just physically on boards and let them have a look. If they're in the same country or the same room, obviously if they're all over the world, then you have to do it in a slightly different way. But we're quite a hands-on physical business, I suppose, still, aren't we? In one way, with people building sets and cameras shooting film, just as it was on Young Indy.
I wonder if talking about Radioland Murders earlier, it got me wondering, because that famously was a movie that George had been kind of tinkering with for about 20 years prior to actually doing it. I wonder when you came on the project, had there been a previous production designer on board like 20 years prior, or were you very much starting from the ground up?
No, I don't think so. I don't know whether it ever got to that. It might have got to discussions with people doing it, I suppose, on that basis. But no, we came in sort of fresh, and I know George, again, was trying to explore sort of the more economic world of visual effects, the same thing, which it was all leading on to Phantom Menace, in a sense, through Young Indy. Radioland Murders and on to that, in a minimal way on Radioland Murders. No, it wasn't like that at all. I think we just came in. It's interesting. We had an interesting conversation today. Obviously, Howard the Duck is obviously a Marvel character, bizarrely, and a lot of the young people here. We haven't got many here, but just saying that George really he made the first Marvel movie.
He has everything except fulfillment.
Listen to me, small visitor. I can explain how you got here.
Maybe you're here for some greater purpose, some cosmic cause.
To explore new relationships. To redefine his self-image.
I'm sorry, we don't allow pets on the premises.
To adjust to a changing lifestyle.
Alright, pull it out!
Until he discovers just who he really is.
Oh no.
A duck in big trouble. Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
Which is very odd. And they're looking at me with you mean he's made a Marvel movie? I think there hadn't really, I saw a thing, before Howard the Duck as Marvel, there'd been a Japanese Spider-Man TV show and an American Captain America, like TV, very simple.
There'd been some made for TV movies essentially, or even the live action Spider-Man was a show, but then they re-edited it into a feature length thing that might have found its way into a few theaters overseas, but George was the first proper this is a movie. Howard the Duck is a character, and we're bringing him to a movie theater near you in America.
And it was Tim Robbins' first role.
Tim Robbins, one of his, I think, very early first roles, but he's very young there, and I love that movie. I no shame about it. I think it's great. And,
he did appear a little bit, I think, in Endgame.
And also Guardians of the Galaxy.
What do you let it lick you like that for? Gross. Your bird's going down.
Apparently there was a bigger scene in Endgame that got cut, and he just ended up, I can't remember it, but he's just wandering in the background in the final battle.
Yeah.
Abstractly so.
That would make sense. I mean, why wouldn't he be there? Everyone else was there, right? It's a great scene for it.
No, but it's funny. The reason to mention that is that, you forget there are people, just chatting in the kitchen here who they don't know those things. They don't know there was a Howard the Duck. There was a film? Yes, it was George Lucas.
That's why we're doing this podcast, for those people.
The nice thing about YouTube and things, whether it's music or film or TV, is it gives people a lot of access to stuff that, at my growing up age, I couldn't look at the equivalent of that 30 years earlier because it just didn't exist in any form. So it's nice that people can revisit all those things. You could probably go online now on YouTube and probably get Howard the Duck. You could probably see it. I don't know.
You can. I mean, it's a weird little movie. It's actually always been in print. There's always been a new version of it coming out on DVD, on Blu-ray, on 4K. So clearly people are buying it, and not just me, but enough people are buying it to justify the reissues. So it's.
No, I think once we get the full art department in, I think I will get a copy, and we'll have a lunchtime screen. I wasn't involved in it at all. It was just because it was 86, so I think I'd just come out. I think it must have been after Jedi, wasn't it? It was after Jedi.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was either on something else he was doing, like the Young Sherlock Holmes or that sort of Return to Oz he sort of was involved with. So, or Empire of the Sun, was it? Maybe Empire of the Sun.
And I think Howard the Duck filmed in America too. So I think you were still being based primarily out of London. So
you were. Yeah. No, so it reminds me. It's interesting. I remember on Empire of the Sun, which is probably 84, I think, Alan Davio was the DP. And he was the first American DP that was allowed to work in the UK.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
With sort of unions and things. It obviously didn't affect me, but I do remember that being quite a big thing. And now it's obviously, since then, it's people over there, people over here on that basis. But the unions were much, much stronger in the UK those days than they were than they are now. Whereas they still are quite strong in the US, obviously.
Gavin, another question that I've always wondered too is, during this time, Young Indiana Jones, Radioland Murders, leading up to the prequels, it's been interesting to learn just about all the other projects that Lucas and Lucasfilm were kind of trying to get off the ground, developing, things like that. I wonder if you have any recollections of any conversations that were maybe had about like, hey, we're working on this 4th Indiana Jones movie, or anything of that sort, that projects that just never came to pass.
Well, no, obviously that came along a lot later, didn't it? I don't know what year was the later. What year was the 4th one?
It was 08 was the Indiana Jones 4, but they had been working on a script in the mid 90s.
Yeah, no, I'm sure I was party to some. Well, not even in the conversation, but just hearing conversations. But I can't. You get so focused on the one you're doing.
Sure.
We're at Pinewood at the moment, and there's Spider-Man, and there's something else, and people outside ask you, "Oh, how's that one going?" Well, I don't know. We never see them. We just we're so engrossed in what we're doing.
Sure.
Into your office, into your stage, into your. It was probably a little bit more because I think with Rick McCallum. As we're traveling and living in other countries on Young Indy, you tend to be a bit more sociable with your film colleagues, because you're not going home at night, you're going to a hotel. So you're right, I can't tell you what it was, but we were probably pretty aware of stuff they were talking about. But I can't think of anything that sort of jumps to my mind that they tried to make and didn't make.
Sure.
Howard the Duck 2.
This is beginning to seriously undermine my self-esteem.
I don't know. Have you ever heard that Marvel have been interested in making?
Well, Seth Green voiced Howard the Duck in the Guardians movie, right? In that one scene. So I heard for years after that there was interest, and certainly he was interested in doing something with the character.
Doing a solo.
Maybe a show, could be. They were doing short TV shows even then, with Agent Carter, and there was just talk of we could do something with this, but I think that's probably come and gone.
I do remember elements of it being very funny.
That's it. No more Mr. Nice Duck. Huh? Let the female creature go. Every duck's got his limit. And you scum have pushed me over the line.
Well, look, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles came out 5 years later.
Are you crazy?
Yeah, Leo, I'm crazy, okay? A loony, okay?
The gags are very similar, right?
Right, yes.
We've been waiting for you, Miss O'Neill.
What? Am I behind on my Sony payments again?
There's a different movie, but it's still, anthropomorphized animals. There's still a girl. There's still that sort of, style of comic book humor. It's not like the movie couldn't have worked. They were onto something. In a few years, that was going to go nuts.
Yeah.
Why don't I ever dream of Harrison Ford?
No, Simon Thorpe, one of our concept guys, who's sort of he's a Marvel geek. I mean, he must have had a very sad upbringing. Because if we ever get any question when something comes up, oh, who's that character? He sort of really understands it. But he was saying that there was a bit of, in the original, there was quite a bit of conflict at some point between Donald Duck and Howard the Duck. And he said it was quite interesting because they then redrew Howard the Duck after that lawsuit or whatever it was. But the redrawn Howard the Duck looked more like Donald the Duck than the one before they had the lawsuit. He said it was a very strange.
I remember hearing, because that was a big point of contention with the movie, is George had to, lawyer up literally and go to court over it.
Oh, did he as well? What, before they did it or afterwards, to get permission?
Yeah, before, just to get permission to even do a movie. And it was a big thing. I mean, it was, this was kind of one of the first time that something like this had really happened. Because, when Marvel did it, it was just kind of seen as a bit of parody, a bit of tongue in cheek, and nobody really cared about comics at that time. And so now this was really the first time where it was this thing that's been, existing for 20 years at this point. It's finally being called out, and it was, contentious. It was contentious for sure.
Yeah.
And now Disney owns Howard the Duck.
Now Disney owns the ultimate revenge is Disney owns Howard. It's
oh yeah, of course, yes. Well, I suppose Disney owns everything. Yes, in that sense.
But although I guess Universal still has a stake in the movie, so
I'm sure, right? The movie, of course,
it's a different. There's still that bitterness, I suppose. That's why it keeps getting re-released. Universal's just like, yeah, take that, Marvel. We're just going to keep putting this movie out. It's one of the things that we just do here at this show. Really, is just highlight these things that are kind of not as well remembered.
Well, that's the point of the documentary.
We're the Young Indie Chroniclers podcast, and we're producing a new feature-length documentary, George Lucas, The Lost Golden Age.
Those 4 years in there was the happiest period for Lucasfilm.
We're thrilled to report Rick McCallum has agreed to sit with us for an all-new exclusive interview just for this documentary. We're also in contact with other key figures from the period, including Ben Burt, Jonathan Hales, and many others who played an enormous part in bringing this era to life.
We built a Kickstarter campaign to support the film. Join us now on this adventure at Kickstarter.com.
Yeah, even within, it's really interesting talking to, the younger guys when those things come up and you realize it's not obviously in their brain. It's not something in their upbringing that ever came up. And it's not just that one. It's like a lot of things you think, mention that to them. And I think it's fascinating, I was always fascinated when I was growing up to hear what the other older guys were saying about what they used to do, however odd and bizarre it often felt like compared to what we were doing. So it's nice to get that information across to some of the younger guys. And I think on one of the shows, we tried to have a film show every lunchtime where people brought in, funnily enough, the worst films they'd worked on. Rather than the best ones, and you're looking back over things, and suddenly you look at things like not Howard the Duck, but you'd look at shows, and even though they had a bad reputation, when you actually saw them, I can see why it didn't work, but it's not as bad as the publicity would make it be. Yeah. So we're all swayed by critics and things, and sometimes you just got to give things a chance.
Well, I've just watched Radioland Murders for the first time, and I had a fantastic time with it. There's a new Blu-ray just came out.
Very funny.
I'd heard a lot of negative publicity, but it's really funny. There's a lot of great gags, great cast.
I was looking for Penny.
To discuss a script. He's a writer.
A writer? I hate writers. They drink too much, they beat their wives.
You know that Roger, it's not a maniac killer. Roger is not organized enough to order dinner, let alone plan 6 murders. Claudette has tried to jump on every man in this building at one time or another. Believe me.
There's a bit of mystery. I kind of knew because I had been doing this so long, but it does a pretty good job of a whodunit, for the first half until too many people die. And you're like, well, there's only so many characters left.
Maybe Lieutenant Cross evolved enough to listen to truth.
That's me. You're talking about me.
Gork knew about crime, Lieutenant. Gork grew up in rough neighborhoods.
50 million people hear it by name, huh?
I still quote lines from that sometimes. Actually, there's that. You might remember this, but in the control room, they're doing a show, and the page boy, whatever he is, in the blue hat, and he's at the back, and they tell him to go and do something, and he says he's going to rush, and they say something like, "No, you can slowly saunter."
Station manager, sir. You're supposed to rush down to the general's office right away. They'll be my boss and all. I suppose you could just slowly saunter if you want to.
Carry on.
When anybody's going to rush off to do something somewhere, I'd say, don't worry, you can just slowly saunter. It's funny how those things sort of... The reason it was a great show to work on was because many reasons, but on a Friday, they always used to shoot the scenes on the stage. So they used to shoot whatever, because they used to shoot the country singer or whatever. They used to shoot those stage sets then.
I want a cop stationed at every exit of the studio. Any man, woman, dog, cat, or duck tries to leave, club him and chain him to a desk.
And by the time we got to the end of the week with the turnaround and the actors, you weren't coming to shoot until 6 in the evening, and you were going through to 5 in the morning.
Wow.
And it just ended up like a big party on the set.
Back in the saddle again, out where a friend is a friend, where the longhorn cattle feed on the lowly Jimson weed. Back in the saddle again.
You're all sitting there watching all these performances going on.
Crazy Anderson. My wife was fooling around with everyone and his dog. Even I know that.
But I'm glad you liked it. It's a flawed movie again, but it's sort of, it doesn't mean that there's not elements in there that work really well.
Absolutely.
And Brian Benben was very funny.
Cats and back, Claude. That's the falling star he caught having an affair. Keep it coming. Beginnings and endings are easy, but your words are twisted and wheezy. Words, twisted and wheezy. That's smoking, coughing.
Let me try to put it another way.
Dexter.
You know, I too rewatched it recently. I'd seen it for the first time maybe in high school, like years ago, and just knew it as a George Lucas produced project or whatever. But rewatching again, I was like, this is actually almost too smart for its own good. Like sometimes the intelligence of the lines or the jokes, just like they're going so quickly that you kind of can miss them. And I think for a lot of critics at the time, they just kind of missed it, you know?
Well, I think Young Indy suffered a bit from that too, didn't it? That it was all, you know, everybody expected every week there'd be an Indiana Jones action movie.
Yeah.
When actually it's quite historical and quite serious drama. Yeah. And I think it just sort of threw people off a little bit, didn't it? People weren't quite ready for that on TV, whereas, as we said, the streaming services now, the dramas you get, historical and contemporary, are just what people are expecting to see.
Well, I think that's been kind of the curse of George throughout his whole career, was every time a new movie of his would come out, people went in with expectations. And when those expectations weren't met, that led to the film being critically reviled. And it took a long time for, you know, the opinions to sway and people to re-examine a lot of these movies, you know, and it's...
Well, you probably didn't see this. Could you see this up here?
No, let's see here. What do we... look at that. Look at that.
For those of you on audio, Gavin has a poster on his wall in his office at Pinewood that it's actually like an ad, a meme, a news clipping advertising the box office. Revenge of the Sith re-release opens to $42 million worldwide. Biggest domestic re-release since 2011.
So I had that in my office for a few guys who were on Doomsday with us, who worked on some of the Disney Star Wars.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now! They fly now!
So I just put that up as just a reminder.
Use my knowledge, I beg you.
No, even I was a bit. I don't know if it was a surprise. That was quite an amazing amount of. Oof, wow.
And it's funny. A friend of mine, old coworker of mine, works at the marketing at Disney, and we had gotten together before it came out. And I said to him, "I feel like they're not marketing this a lot." You know, I knew about the re-release, and he said to me, "They don't need to." He goes, "The tracking on this is so good." He goes, "The numbers on this movie are so good, we don't need to do anything." And sure enough.
Wow. What was odd is we had the re-release of Phantom Menace, 3 years ago, at 25 years?
Just last year.
So I still couldn't quite understand. So that was 25 years, was it?
Yeah.
It was 25 years, yes.
So the Sith release was...
So it was the 20th.
So why did they not... So when are we seeing Clones released?
It was just before dawn. They came out of nowhere.
The dark side clouds everything. In grave danger you are.
As my first act, I will create a grand army of the Republic to counter the increasing threats of the Separatists.
Begun this Clone War has.
Oh, well, that's a very good question. Internet, Gavin Bocquet would like to know when we are seeing Attack of the Clones. We echo that question. I did not ask my friend what the Disney stats for Attack of the Clones were, so...
No, because we thought every 2 years we'd get Phantom Menace, we'd get Clones, and then we got Sith. And then suddenly Sith came out like at the 20-year anniversary, not the 25.
Only a Jedi could have erased those files. But who and why? Harder to answer. Meditate on this
I will.
I think Sith, they knew it was going to do very well. And so the 20th anniversary, they thought, well, that's an opportunity. And Phantom Menace beat expectations as well. It didn't make as much money as Sith did, but it was number one in its opening weekend here in the States. If it had not been the 20th anniversary, maybe they would have figured something out. And maybe they still will. The 25th anniversary of Clones would be in 27, which is also the 50th anniversary. They've already announced they're doing A New Hope for 27.
Wow.
So maybe we'll I heard there's a limited release of Force Awakens this year that they're not really publicizing very much. So we could see a Clones re-release like that in that same year where they put it out for a little bit.
What's nice is that we get, you get a chance to go and see it at the cinema. However good screens are and things these days, to sit in a cinema with people watching something as epic as those films is just like an absolute pleasure, whether you're involved in it or not. It's just like seeing it as it was meant to be seen originally.
And Sith looks so good. I think it looked better in the theater than it ever looked before whatever they did, remastering and the audience. I mean, I went and saw it several times and the audiences were just eating it up and quoting the lines at the end, the high ground lines. Like they just get so into it,
It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground! You underestimate my power!
I think the funniest one, isn't it, is The Big Bang Theory, where it's a fake. What is it? It's a fake? No, it's a trap.
It's a trap.
It's a trap.
Admiral, we have enemy ships in Sector 27.
It's a trap.
Just that things just go into. Was that Jedi or was that Empire? Was that Jedi?
It's a trap as Jedi, yeah.
It's a trap.
Yeah, Jedi, yeah. So, something you're on becomes almost a meme in another very well-known sitcom. Just like, well, how did that? Obviously, no intention that was not a reason for that line or anything to be in there, but it just becomes something that is. I think they do a couple of Star Wars mimicry in that as well, I think, in different episodes.
Oh, mimicry. I enjoy mimicry. I've been working on Admiral Akbar from Return of the Jedi. It's a trap! You have to imagine me with a giant squid head. It's a trap!
No, people love it. It's a huge part of the culture. I know those, and you worked on the prequels, and people like to criticize them, but they were a tremendous part of the culture, certainly in this country, and I think the world. And how many people, when they were 10, saw Ewan McGregor say,
I have the high ground.
It just leaves an impression on them. It's something about it sticks with you. And so 20 years later,
I have the high ground. I have the high ground.
Yeah. We've got generations here that I talked to about it, and they, the prequels were their trilogy because of their ages. It wasn't the first three. That was at the time they were. So they see that as theirs. The three prequels were their trilogy. As much as they respect the others, it's like that's what they grew up on. My daughter was, and her friends, when they were coming out, were about 7 or 8 or something like that. And I think, that's who they came, that's who, even Jar Jar, that's who they were brought up with. And of course, everything was much more fast paced. They were getting used to the speed of what you see on games and everything. And they look back at the old ones and they were just too slow.
How did we get into this mess? I really don't know how. We seem to be made to suffer. It's our lot in life.
Right.
It was that they were all put together in a different time.
No, a friend of mine, I remember he had just gotten married and it was a big day. He was going to show his wife Star Wars for the first time and he invited, but we all went over and he was like, I'm a purist. I'm going to show her the original 77. I said, are you sure you want to do that? I said, because she's never seen Star Wars. We don't know. And the first 30 minutes of that movie, it's just 2 robots walking through the desert.
What makes you think there are settlements over there?
At the end of Doomsday, George gave us a really nice book, produced a book with blueprint book. I don't know whether you've seen it, but it's the big thing, and it covers the prequels and the most. 2/3 is the first 3, then the third is ours. And I had it up in the art department because it has a lot of technical drawings showing the art department. Before digital drawing, it was all hand drawn. And I brought Kevin Feige up because, since I started working with Kevin, I've realized he's as much a Star Wars fan as he is a Marvel fan. So I brought him up to look at it, and we were looking at some really nice descriptions like R2. Roger Christian, the set deco, was talking about when they first introduced R2 into the sand, the first time they shot him. And John Barry, the production designer, said to Roger, look, the special effects guys are great, they're doing it, but let's just make a dummy R2 that we can pull by a wire as well. And he says, like, on the first day of shooting, they got the mechanical one out there. Basically, it fell over. So they bought on the other one that they just pulled along with a wire. So, and that's great about that book, actually, because it has all these little, and it's not just pictures of blueprints, it's related stories to it. So, and I'd actually forgotten it was upstairs. I'd forgotten. I mean, that's the nice world of George and Rick, and we got another 2 big books of stills from that. Because he was an independent filmmaker in theory, George, in all that time, that you could do those things. And I don't, the corporate world now doesn't do that, on that basis. No. The only other person to wave that flag, I have to say, for him was Tim Burton after we did Miss Peregrine show. He produced a hardback book of every department, photographs that he took as he was going around, even the cleaners, the people who washed the cars. There were little sections on all of them that he put together and gave out. So good for him to do that, because you generally don't see that sort of, the business world has taken over a little bit.
Well, you mentioned Kevin Feige. Have you ever discussed Young Indiana Jones with him?
Well, what was interesting, he was fascinating when he realized that I'd worked on Radioland Murders.
Oh, interesting.
It was like, you worked on Radioland Murders? Yeah. So it's sort of...
What did he say about Radioland Murders?
He was just fascinated by it. He's obviously very keen on it. Obviously, Star Wars was a big thing, as Marvel was. But, you think, I wouldn't have even thought he might have known about it, let alone. Right. And then he was even more amazed that I worked on Jedi, because sure. It's like, I was just a munchkin. But it was... I see why I've got the job.
Yeah, he's like, your references come approved.
Yes, so it's on that. But he obviously didn't look back that far. You know what I mean? It wasn't like going back into that sort of world, but you do realize how much of it affected even something like Radioland Murders. Interesting that we're talking about that and you've seen it, that even for him, it was like, oh, wow, that was like,
Well, he's of that age. He's of that age of that.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah. So that was, he's, obviously he's a big guy, but he's very nice, very personable, just loves filmmaking.
No, it's been interesting to hear and learn about how, the people who do love, like Joel McNeely, composer on Young Indy, like he connected up with Seth MacFarlane because Seth just really loved the work that he had done. Not just on Young Indy, but also specifically on Radioland Murders. And Seth just loves that style of music. And it's always funny to find these big names in Hollywood who either worked on these shows or have been influenced and inspired by these shows. And it creates the effects of these properties are still being felt today, I think. So it's very interesting.
Well, I say, as we said earlier with YouTube and all of those, the access is so brilliant nowadays that people can really just find is almost too much to find out. Things that you think, in the past, you used to put films to bed that you worked on 10 years previously. You thought, well, nobody's ever going to know about that or see that again. Now we're talking about these things. It's like it's completely out there if people want to catch up on them.
Absolutely.
Well, it's important to keep the past alive. These are cultural artifacts.
Yeah, no, sometimes you don't want that. Sometimes you want things to disappear.
Sometimes you want them to forget, yeah, right.
But even the ones that didn't work are just as valid. They're all part of your learning process. And, our job is really important, obviously, the way the film looks, but we don't necessarily determine if a film is successful or not. The magic of Stardust being on does it work? How does that all come together? I mean, a film never really lives on how it looks. We're a big part of helping tell the story and tell who the characters are. But if you're not engaged in the story and the characters, it's not going to work, whatever work we do on it. So we are part of that thing. And that's why I suppose we're all quite excited about it, because you never quite know, however hard you work just as hard on the bad ones as you do on not bad ones, on the ones that don't work, as you do on the ones that do work. And people don't generally just work on good ones, and they've all got ones that didn't quite work, and not for any reason that anybody on the film did a bad job. Just when you put it all together, if the magic dust isn't sprinkled, it ain't going to work. But it can be revisited, as we now know, and reassessed.
$42 million.
Gavin, I wanted to ask you, after Revenge of the Sith, you went off and did a bunch of projects. We mentioned a few of them in this last hour. Were you ever called back in to inquire about working on other projects at Lucasfilm, whether it was Indy 4 or Star Wars Underworld was in development?
No, because I think Indy, I think the Spielberg connection was a separate entity to George. I think my connection with George was Rick and George, and we were very much that sort of world. There was one call came in about one of the Star Wars future ones that have been made a little while ago. But apart from having to, earn a living and support the family, it didn't really interest me. That was it was a very special time of life and a chance to work on those shows, and it would not have been the same.
And that was one without George. That was a Disney one.
Oh, this is after the Disney one. Yeah, this was the Disney Star Wars or whatever they would call them. It just wasn't, it didn't end up as being an offer, but I wouldn't, it was like, do I really want to go back there? It's not making anything special about what work we did on the other ones, but it was it's about your life and the enjoyment in your life as much as just going in and doing the job each day. When you look back at those experiences, about who you met, where you went, what you did. It's not just about the creativity of the film. It's all obviously all together in that sort of basis. But no, nothing else. No, I think because anything that came like Indy came because they were Spielberg orientated, and we weren't in that world. We were George's world, really.
I know Rick said, I saw an interview maybe in the late 2000s, for the Star Wars TV show they were going to make in Australia, that he had booked out stages. I mean, they had rented stages. So they never talked to you about coming back to that show?
No, they talked about the show, but whether I was on something else or doing something else, no, not at all. I did speak to Rick about 6 months ago. So I think if you spoke to him, I think he's doing a documentary on George.
We knew he was doing documentaries for George. He on George would be cool. He's
doing one. I don't know whether it's a book or whether it's a documentary or whether he was coming back across to London. No, sometimes you don't. There are periods in your life that need to stay as those periods.
Yeah.
Not get diluted or changed because you can't relive it again. It's a bit, I don't know, a bit like going back to an old girlfriend. Maybe it never quite works. I don't know.
Sure.
Or you can't go home again.
So, on that basis.
That's very true.
No, I mean, sometimes people think, I've got quite a little sort of experience about doing things, and people think, you get lots of scripts rolling through your letterbox. No, it's never like that. An offer comes along, and if it's halfway right and it's going ahead and it's willing to pay you, you say yes. There's only some very top people who would get a choice, and the choices are often hard because you'll get three possibilities, but one's definite, one is half definite, one's not very definite, but the one that's not very definite might be the one you want to do.
I'm on the job market right now. You're describing my life perfectly. That's how it goes.
I just don't get job offers, so I don't know any of this.
So it's always it's a freelance business. It's always a struggle. I'm a bit older now, but that's fine. You get people like Joe who really value that experience, and generally the film business isn't that ageist. Generally, they value your experience. It doesn't exclude new people coming in, of course it doesn't. Otherwise, none of us would get where we are. If you don't get your first job, like me getting young Indy, you're not going to go on that ladder, are you? So you need somebody to give you that chance. Your sliding doors moments, they can take you in many different directions, and I could have had just as interesting life if something had changed and gone another direction on that. Like I didn't meet Stuart Craig to get me in the first film on Saturn III. There was no other way into the film business at that time when he pulled me out of the college. So my life would have gone in a completely different direction. I can't sit here and say it would have been better or worse. It could have been better. You know, you can't ever imagine what the other versions of sliding doors would take you to. You can only appreciate the one line you take. What I try to say to students when we talk to them is that however many plans you make for your career, it will go off in many different directions because you can never anticipate who you're going to bump into, where you're going to go to, at any little bit of synchronicity.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Gavin, and I really appreciate it. Good luck on this current assignment. It's very exciting times, and keep bragging about that Revenge of the Sith poster.
Yeah, no, it's staying up there. I'm not taking it down.
Have the art department laminate it. It needs to be preserved.
Absolutely.
All right, I appreciate all your efforts. So just keep in touch whenever you want.
Thank you so much.
Listeners out there, if you want to get in touch with us, you can find us on Instagram, pretty much all the socials these days. If you just want to type in Young Indie Chroniclers. You can also find the Kickstarter, information about the Kickstarter at Kickstarter.com. If you want to search George Lucas or even just George, as Daniel said at the beginning of the episode, that'll lead you to our page. You can still contribute. And even if you're listening to this after the Kickstarter is wrapped up, we are accepting late pledges. So you can pre-order the Blu-ray. It goes directly into the production of the film, and we can really use it at this time. So please seek us out there. And also you can find the documentary specific socials on, again, all the socials, George Lucas, The Lost Golden Age. So for Daniel and myself, thanks very much again for being here. And until next time, keep on adventuring.
Next time on the Young Indie Chroniclers.
We're thrilled to have Matt Bradley Shergi. Wrote a book, Star Trek and Video Games, and reached out to us a while back to give us a rundown of Young Indiana Jones and video games.
The consoles now have, 16 buttons or something on them with all these combinations, and Atari was a joystick with just one action button on the top. The Super Nintendo Indiana Jones, Indiana Jones's Greatest Adventures, and it used the engine from the Super Star Wars games to do the Indiana Jones trilogy. The Indiana Jones, that it even ties into the show at all is pretty remarkable.